of Christ. My name is Beth Rogers. I'm the associate pastor here, and it is my great privilege to invite you all into this space tonight as we play host to all of these wonderful people and all of you who are here to really show that we are a committed community. It is a privilege certainly to offer this space for the community, for tonight's organizing groups, to come together around all of the issues that matter to us. Tonight's event is being co-hosted by 7 organizations, all part of Our Minnesota Future. They're all statewide organizations. If you haven't had a chance before tonight, before our forum starts, to look at all of those tables down this hallway out here, please make sure and stop there on your way out, so that you can hear a little bit from all of the organizations that have put tonight's event together. So those organizations are Isaiah, who is a statewide faith-based organization that works on racial and economic justice with over 150 congregations in our state. CURE, Communities United for Rochester Empowerment, a member-led organization of low and moderate income people fighting for economic and racial justice by holding politicians and corporations accountable. SEIU Healthcare Minnesota, a union of healthcare and long-term workers in hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, and home care throughout Minnesota, with 2,500 members here in southeast Minnesota. Sierra Club, an organization of over 3 million of your neighbors and friends working for just, equitable, and fast solutions to our most pressing environmental challenges. Navigate Minnesota, a nonprofit organization that builds power for immigrant rights and for educational justice. In the City for Good, founded in the fall of 2015 to promote an informed and engaged community committed to sharing the benefits of economic growth with all who live and work in Rochester. And Minnesota 350, a volunteer-driven organization that organizes for climate justice through issue campaigns on a grassroots level. Thank you to all of them for hosting this event and for being a part of this wonderful all of us, as the host tonight, the people of peace, are grateful to the leadership of these organizations in pulling together the stories and the questions that you will hear tonight that will focus our time in areas that are important to many among us. A few notes tonight on tonight's event, as well as what you may have already noticed. If you need assistance in any way and you're looking for something, look for someone with a yellow sticker. Those are peace members that can help you find something if you need something. Or a green one that says, ask me. Those are some of our organizers for tonight, who are on the ins and outs of what our event will be tonight. There are clipboards that will start being passed down your rows. I believe they're already started now. Please sign in on those to help us track how many people are here tonight and really make a statement about how vital these issues are to our community. If you need to know where the bathrooms are, you're going to go out this door, and just to the right, there's a gender-neutral bathroom first, and then men's and women's bathroom. They're all on the same wall, just outside of this room. We know that thousands of people in our community speak Spanish and Somali, and we believe that everyone should be able to participate in tonight's forum, so we've made a commitment to language justice tonight. Simultaneous interpretation in Somali and Spanish are being provided. So if you need a headset and do not have one already, please go to the table right outside this door, just to the right of this middle door for a headset so that you can get connected. And if you are using translation equipment, please remember to turn your headset in on your way out tonight. We are live streaming tonight's event on Facebook, on the CURE Facebook page. Please check that out. Or send your friends at home who are not able to be here that link so that they can participate in this wonderful event as well. We do have an overflow room out in the other side, just the other side of our hallway out there. As people come in and aren't able to find a seat in here, they'll have a space out there. For those following tonight on Twitter and Facebook, the hashtag we're using tonight is up there right now, MNGov and RochMN. So please tag your comments in that so that we can really all be a part of that conversation. And so with that, I want to welcome our moderator, Don Barlow, pastor of Rochester Community Baptist Church and member of the Rochester Public School Board, to start us off. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Tonight it's all about you, and we want to ensure that we are respectful both in terms of our responses to the candidates and their responses to the questions. Further, we want you to support the ability to hear clearly by turning down or off your electronic devices should you have them with you now. Additionally, for the candidates, they will have 2 minutes apiece to respond to the questions which are asked of them. We're asking you to hold your applause and or appreciation towards the end where we can thank the candidates together. And toward the end of the formal questions, there are over 100 online questions submitted. We will draw from a basket one of those questions that the candidates then will respond to. And without further ado, we'll begin our questioning now.
Hello, my name is Milan Bo, and I am a proud member of CURE, Communities United for Rochester Empowerment. My fellow member, Linda Parsons, was planning to ask this question tonight, but due to health concerns, she isn't able to be here. So here's Linda's story. Rochester, like communities across the state, is facing a crisis in affordable housing. I recently became homeless after my rent increased by 25%. I know I am not alone. Thousands of people are struggling to pay skyrocketing rents and housing costs every day. In Rochester, we were told the $585 million Destination Medical Center, or DMC project, was going to benefit our entire community, not just the Mayo Clinic. Instead, DMC development has only increased housing prices even further. After seeing a lack of action from local leaders last August, we formed CURE, a member-led organization of low and moderate income people to hold decision makers accountable. We held countless public meetings and actions and shared our stories and called attention to the housing crisis. In December, after months of public pressure, Mayo Clinic finally committed to contributing $4 million to affordable housing. This is a good start, but far more needs to be done in order to ensure that every family has a safe, stable, accessible, and affordable place to live. So our question is, as governor, what will you do at the state level to address the housing crisis in Minnesota? And in addition, how will you ensure that the tax dollars invested in DMC become a win-win for our local community and not make the housing crisis worse? Thank you.
This is a tremendous challenge. Is the mic on here? No. Well, let's solve that first. Wow. Sounds like it's on now. Okay. Hi. That is a huge challenge that we're facing. We are in the 21st century. This is a century of automated everything. And I'm rolling out a book-length plan that combines transit and housing. The idea is that our roads are actually rivers of people. And if we build a system that is designed to install housing units automatically, to automate the entire thing, and to have automated driverless vehicles running on these arterial roads, we can actually move people's housing units from Rochester to Minneapolis on a weekly basis as part of an overall system. We need to think in terms of centuries. We need to think in terms of what we the people can do working with public-private partnerships to address these issues. Our economy depends on maintaining stable prices, but the reality is with technology and automation, we can produce new systems that are far less expensive than we have. The way to establish equilibrium is to do that, but keep the right-of-way in the public domain and take the surplus and put that as part of the budget for the government. So I'm going to be laying this out in detail at book length, And I'm going to try to get Amazon to reconsider coming here and working with us on that. I'm very disappointed that we dropped out so early. We got to get them here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Erin Murphy, and I am very, very happy to join you tonight in a church, in a sacred space. For me, politics and our democracy have been sacred acts to serve us and to serve our future, and I am glad to be with you here tonight. Affordable housing, of course, is an issue for people all over the state of Minnesota. When I was first elected, I remember going into the legislature thinking, I'm going to fix healthcare. I'm a nurse. And there was a study that was issued in that very first year. It was the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and Hearth Connection that showed the very important connection between housing and health. We know that our kids can't learn if they don't have a safe place to live. We know that you can't hold down a job if you don't have a safe place to live. And a safe place to live is fundamental, not only to our health, but really to who we are as people. We need to continue the commitment that I have made to $100 million in a bonding bill every time we do a bonding bill. So we are building affordable housing across the state of Minnesota, but we also have to think through the development that's happening here and in different parts of the state and use policy and our voices to make sure that the housing that is being built is dispersed across our communities, that as development is happening, that it includes affordable housing, like the place that I was just in Minneapolis that had lofts and condominiums and affordable housing all in one unit. That mixed use is not only good for housing and for families and community, it's good for climate and sustainability. So it is a win-win for us, and it's something that we have to continue to pursue as people. From my perspective, we are not a free people without a home, and affordable housing for people, whether it's workforce housing or housing itself, is critical to the state's future, and it is my priority as your state's governor.
Well, thank you. Always a pleasure to be here. I'm practically a neighbor of yours. I grew up in Zumwalt, Minnesota. I used to take a bus down to Rochester when I was 12 years old. Nobody worried about me getting on the bus and coming down here all by myself and going into Osco Drug and buying a box of 24 candy bars for 99 cents. So here's the question, affordable housing. It has to be affordable, but the people have to be able to afford it also. It's really some healthy tension there. And I have done a lot of real estate developing. I've worked with a lot of the cities. One of the tragedies now is that many of the cities think they own everybody's land. And so it's become very expensive to buy the land. They want you to do this, this, and so on and so forth. And while I'm sure their hearts are well intended, it does increase the cost of the housing significantly. And once a person buys a condominium or a townhouse, there are carrying costs. What are the association dues? And what are the real estate taxes? So it's not just simply a matter of being able to purchase something at a reasonable price. So the prices are escalating, and the more that the cities require these, the more the prices are going to go up. And by requiring these, I mean the amenities in there. Obviously, some of them are safety issues. Excuse me, so they are required. That's appropriate. However, I also believe that people need to have a reasonable chance to have a decent job that pays a healthy wage. And that does not happen today. We need to figure out a way for people to get jobs that make sense so they can make a living that makes sense. And that will reflect the healthy tension between what they make and what the cost is of the housing unit they seek to acquire and in which they wish to live.
I'm Rebecca Otto. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I'm the state auditor. I serve on the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Board, where we help finance affordable housing throughout the state of Minnesota. And affordable housing usually starts at the local level with local decisions. And the state has some resources, the federal government has some resources, and it takes a whole lot of resources to develop affordable housing. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of effort in a community. Now, with the DMC situation, where it was supposed to be a win-win for all, if I am lucky enough to be your governor, we will realize that dream. And that's going to be through my appointments, through my chair appointment, as well as board appointments. My board appointments will be reflective of our community here, to make sure that we're making best decisions that really, truly help the people who also work in the community. And so let's realize that dream. So that's a commitment I can make to you here tonight. The other thing around affordable housing is, and it's happening all over the state, there's very few places, when your vacancy rate in rental units is down to about 5%, rents are going to go up, and our housing costs are going up. It's a real serious situation. So like Aaron, $100 million bonding bill should be a minimum annually for affordable housing in our state. And we need senior housing, we need workforce housing. There's so many areas that we are behind the ball. In fact, for our senior citizens, we're going to try to help people age in place for 20 years until we actually have the housing stock. So homelessness does not work in Minnesota. It's too cold. And so this is just a basic fundamental. Well, it's true. So it's not an option here, and that's why we have to have a sense of urgency on this issue. And again, I have Fight for 15. I want to raise the wage to $15 an hour. That's going to help people stay in their homes. I also have a plan to get to universal health care. That's going to take pressure off of people's budgets. And 2 years tuition free to help all of our children actually access the economy in a meaningful way. So I've got a lot of plans to lift all boats. But this affordable housing piece, we must continue to work on.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Tim Walls, and I wanted to thank you all. Thanks to the Peace Congregation for holding this, and thank you all for all of you of doing something that literally billions of people around the world could only dream of, gathering as free people to talk about how we govern and how we improve our societies. This issue of affordable housing has been around a long time. We held a summit clear back in 2012 where we gathered hundreds of people throughout southern Minnesota. And the issue is from Worthington to Alden, to Rochester and across, and it's all across the state. And the issues that have been addressed so far, it is true on this. We need to make sure people are making a living wage. People have the capacity, the education, the skill set to be able to do this. There are things out there that have already been working. Rochester's First Home is a program that's been around a long time that started to address it. It's been there. There is no doubt that DMC provides challenges and opportunities that will come with it. We are reforming to make this one of the world's great cities. And it needs to be a fact of this, and my running mate Peggy Flanagan has a saying that says, the people most impacted by the decisions we make need to be at the table when we make them. It's critical that as these funds are starting to go out, or the things that go in place. Now, it's absolutely clear that the federal government's low-income tax credit, something I've advocated for, is critical in making this happen. Another thing is it's making sure that the people who actually build the homes are involved in this. That is the skilled carpenters and the trade unions, folks who are supporting and are in, and we need to make sure that we're training up folks to be able to do that, and the builders who are going to invest. We can't ask people to be able to build if there's not a return on the money to get there. So coupled with low-income tax credit, some of the things we can do in the state to incentivize this, making sure we have a good homegrown workforce that's being paid a living wage starts to get at the heart of this. But as was said earlier, this is foundational to making sure that that child comes to school ready to learn, people feel invested in their communities. Before DMC was put in place, just the city of Rochester, the housing stock needs were 11,000 family homes and 7,000 rental units. That has only been exacerbated. As your governor, my pledge on so many things, and you don't have to guess how I'll do this, I built coalitions to solve the problem, and we can see this as an opportunity to make our community stronger and more inclusive.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tina Liebling, State Representative from Rochester. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. It's great to see a lot of friends in the audience and a lot of friends I haven't met yet as well. So let's start by acknowledging that in order to have a successful community and a successful state and a successful country, we need everybody. We don't need only the wealthy. We don't need only people who have, highly technical, highly skilled jobs. And one of the wonderful things about the Rochester community is that we really do have a diverse community, and we have lots and lots of people here, including many in this room who are working to have that really rich and diverse and inclusive community. The problem of affordable housing, it's great to have been on the stage many, many times with my colleagues here, at least many of them, because we hear each other talk all the time. And I think one of the big messages that I've had through the entire campaign is that affordable housing is related to what you're able to earn. And I'm glad to hear that message being picked up. The reality is that wages have not gone up. We have to raise the minimum wage so that people have more opportunity to actually have their wages be able to earn them enough to live. Because right now, even $15 an hour in many places, including here, is not enough even for a basic standard of living. So that has to be number one, and we have to figure out how to help our small employers do that. There are many different ways we have to address affordable housing. The state definitely has a role. The city and county have a role. As far as DMC, it was designed so that the city council has a lot of influence over what projects are done and how the planning is done. So if we want to make sure that DMC works for everybody, we need a strong city council with a backbone that'll make sure that happens.
Hello, my name is Maria Zavala, and I am a member of St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church here in Rochester, and I am also a DACA recipient. I got involved with Isaiah by driving voters to be part of the faith delegate path for the Minnesota caucus. I know I can't vote, but I have friends who can and care deeply what happens to me and my family. For over 3 decades, we have seen the scapegoating of immigrant families in this country, and Minnesota isn't the exception of that. Now we have seen the failure of Congress to pass the Clean Dream Act that will have serious consequences on my future, as well as many other families. This is why I'm here today. My family has lived in Rochester for 14 years. For those 14 years, I have seen my father work 2 jobs to support me and my family. Now, this isn't only about me and my DACA status, but about entire families that are being separated. Their rights are being violated every day by immigration enforcement. Some of our elected officials have opted to support immigration and run on anti-immigration agendas than to represent all of their citizens. We are joining all communities to stop the social detriments of health, lack of education, medical and mental health access, lack of housing, and low-paying jobs for low socio-economic working families. One of the biggest issues in Minnesota is a lack of leadership from both parties to pass driver license for undocumented immigrants. This is one of the issues affecting immigrant families the most, and leaving children without parents and women and men without a spouse to support their families. We need a leadership that is looking at how to invest Minnesota resources to immigrant families instead of investing Minnesota resources to cooperating with immigration. If elected governor, what will you do to fight the scapegoating, demonization, and persecution of immigrants and refugees? Specifically, what will you do to work with the Minnesota legislature to restore access to driver's license that were taken away by Tim Pawlenty in 2003? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Buenas noches. It's a hard question. You're asking the question, and it's an important question about who we are and about who I am in pursuit of the office of being Minnesota's next governor. I was in a church in 2014 in North Minneapolis where I made a commitment to vote for and to support driver's licenses for people who are not documented here in the state of Minnesota. And as your governor, I'll keep that commitment, and I will work with this community to make sure we get that done, either through executive order or through working with the legislature. And I understand why we need to do it. We need to do it not only for public safety, so people have access to health or driver's insurance, but really as a measure of representation of who we are together as people. Minnesota and America is a place that welcomes people. It is a place that is open to people. And I know that as we have continued to diversify all over the state of Minnesota, right? As we've seen people come as refugees from Eastern Africa, as we've seen people come as refugees from Southeast Asia, as we've seen people come as refugees from Eastern Europe. Over time, those communities, as refugees, have become a part of Minnesota, and they have built us. They have made us stronger, they've made us more diverse, and they have made us richer. That is the Minnesota that I believe in. So know, as your state's governor, that I will work with this community to make sure that driver's licenses are available for people that are not documented. That law enforcement in the state of Minnesota will not be an extension of ICE, because ICE under this administration is ripping apart families and hurting our communities. And I will not stand for that. I will not tolerate that as the governor for the state of Minnesota. But know this as well, and this is important. We are a state that is open, and we welcome people, including people who are in harm's way in other parts of the world. And as your governor, refugees will be welcome in the United States of America, and they will be welcome in our Minnesota. And I will never take a safe political vote that puts people in harm's way, as the congressman did, because that does not represent my values, and it does not represent the very best of Minnesota. I'm so glad for your question. Thank you for being here tonight.
So the first part of the question is, what will I do to fight the scapegoating, demonization, and persecution of immigrants and refugees? I think it's helpful we draw the curtain here and distinguish between those who are legal residents and legal citizens of the United States and those who are not. Most of us, including my family, we've been citizens of America for 150 years. We farmed over in the Zumbroda, Wanamingo area. And probably a good chunk of the people who are here this evening came here as people from other countries. They went through the process, they became legal citizens. I go around and talk with a lot of people, all faiths, all backgrounds, all different political persuasions. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that they are opposed to people who are in this country legally and have become legal citizens. The rub is, quite frankly, when you came here illegally and you did come here legally, no effort has been made to become a citizen. I think we have to draw the distinction between those two. No one scapegoats those who have come through the process and are here legally. I would never do that, obviously. I'm in the landlord-tenant business. I have people from other countries. I have Muslims who are tenants of mine. And I would never, ever think about something like that. I know they are here legally, and I don't ask them that question, but they volunteer that information. They're proud of the fact they're here. They're proud of the fact I treat them with dignity and respect, which they are entitled to. However, we need to be very, very important that we don't castigate somebody who might think we ought to change the system, that they're talking about people who are here legally. They're not. And unpleasant as it is, I've always been a very, very direct person. It is those people who are not here legally that are feeling they are...
Undocumented! Here to stay! Undocumented! Here to stay! Undocumented! Here to stay! Undocumented! Here to stay!
We want to remind everyone that we have agreed to be respectful and honor each other, and we all have opinions, but we will try to respectfully share them later at the appropriate time.
Well, just a little side quick comment. I welcome protests. I've never been bothered by that. I've done plenty of protesting in my life, but I haven't had anybody clap for me since I was in high school and played basketball and shot free throws. And they said, "Come on, Lance, let's hit another one, just like the other one."
Maria, thank you for your sharing your story and your question. And I definitely support driver's licenses for undocumented workers for a variety of reasons. We have our fellow Minnesotans who are being victimized. There's a lot of reasons why we need to make sure that we get that done. And I know we have some Republican support in the House to get that done. Ron Hamilton's been an advocate. So I will work for that. Demonization and scapegoating and all those horrible things. I have a mouth and it works. That's what I say sometimes. I'll just be pure and simple about it. I don't like hateful behavior. I don't tolerate it. I taught 7th grade. I taught 12 and 13-year-olds, and so they weren't allowed to say certain things in my classroom. So it's going to be the same thing with the president, and I will call him out if he does. Just saying. I will. I say if you can teach 195 12 and 13-year-olds, you can do anything. And I also have a plan to get to universal health care for all Minnesotans, and we will cover undocumented workers. We will cover undocumented workers. And it's going to include mental health services and substance abuse treatment, because that's the fundamentals to health, and I think I heard you mention that as well. So we care about our people. What I told people around the state is, you know, no matter where you live in the state, whether it's north, south, central, metro, North Minneapolis, we're all Minnesotans. We might not always like each other, we might not always agree with each other, but we must care about each other. And so that's the approach that I'm going to take as governor. And I said it to many people when they begin to try to demonize a group. I said, don't demonize that group. We are all Minnesotans. We must all care about each other. My campaign is all about the common good. We're all human beings. We're united by our common humanity. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I think those are the main things. And also, not carrying out the work of ICE. So we will make sure that we protect our fellow Minnesotans.
Thank you for the question, for so many of you here. What's great about being in this space is you don't need someone to define me. You've known me as a teacher. You were here for my family and tragedy in this community, and you've seen how I've acted as your representative over the years. You know, my first campaign that I ran, they had Steve King from Iowa up here campaigning against me. 2 days after I was elected, I was in the church with Father Brixus in Worthington in the basement after the ice raid, standing there. Over the years, my office has helped resettle countless people into this community. I've stood on the issues. In 2005, I ran on the issue of driver's licenses for everyone, the dignity of it, the safety of it, and just making the case. More importantly, of standing on these issues and making the case with Dreamers. There's many of you in this room that over the years have stood together with us as we made the case. We need to get that done. I disagreed last week when the United States Senate decided to leave our leverage away as they passed a short-term budget deal, and now we're left hanging on that. As governor of Minnesota, one of the things I know the most important thing is you cannot fix any issue by dividing. And at a place of redemption and hope that we set in here right now, the solutions to these things are bringing in people who are on the sidelines that maybe don't know, maybe feel a little bit of not sure why, what's happening here, what happened with this. And the job of where I come from is as an educator, the lifelong educator, of bringing people together. I was at a chamber event where they said we're auditioning to be the CEO of the state. No, we're not. We're auditioning to be the teacher of the state. We're auditioning to be someone who brings people together and forms coalition. So on this issue, what we can do is reassure people that the system's safe. We can truly pass comprehensive immigration reform to make sure that people have a line to get into, so those people who think that's it. We can educate and make sure everyone has that opportunity, and we can decide on these issues. If we want to break into camps for short-term political gain, fair enough. But if we want to really solve it, it's going to take reaching out to our neighbors who aren't in this space tonight, but whose hearts can be there. We're stronger for it. We are a nation of immigrants. Those people who say we're a nation of laws, we are. Those two are not incompatible, and we can make it work. As your governor, as I've done as your representative, I've stood up. And the one thing that you know for darn certain in this district, I have never taken a vote for political safety. I'm the last of the progressive rural Democrats, and I'm proud of that.
Primero, gracias por tu pregunta y mi corazón está contigo. So my heart is really with Maria. You know, this is something where, let's just remember that children don't choose where they're born. They don't choose their families, right? And people who are coming to this country and who are risking so much to come without documents are doing it out of desperation. They're doing it because America offers a promise to them, or at least they thought it did. And I want to be in a country where that promise is alive. You know, it's all great to say, well, we're all immigrants, but we came legally. Well, that isn't entirely true. My own grandmother snuck in her little brother by disguising him as a girl. She did, at Ellis Island, because he was deaf, and they wouldn't let in a deaf kid. So she disguised him as a little girl and pretended he was shy to sneak him into this country. I'm proud of her for that. That's a story I want to remember. So I think we need to be talking to Minnesotans about the fact that we need you. We need you. Whether you have documents or not, I was just listening to public radio on the way down from St. Paul, and they were talking about DACA people who would have been DACA, but they were deported, and they're in Mexico, and they're like the cream of the crop, and they're going to revive Mexico's economy because they're doing all these incredible things. What the heck are we doing? We've got shortages of skilled workers. we don't have the kind of young people that we need. Why would we send away the ones we've got, that we've educated them, and they're so talented? It's such an important part of our community. So we need to do whatever we can. I absolutely support the driver's licenses. I tried to push Governor Dayton to do that. I think he actually could have done it before the Republicans took it away from him, the ability to fix it. He could have done it and he should have done it. Sometimes we just need the courage to act and do the right thing.
Thank you for the question, and I can see it's a hard one for you to ask. Our biggest problem in this country today is that we're so divided. It's a huge problem. I've never seen anything like it. I am a Republican. I have written a book advocating that we take a look at our Constitution because I think we misunderstood our impeachment provisions, and I'm advocating that President Trump either resign or be impeached. I'm going to be campaigning on that issue. And Republicans in Minnesota are going to have a candidate on the ballot on their primary that's advocating to that. But our biggest problem is division. I've always tried to work with people of both parties. And I think that people here, the DFL candidates, know that. It's something I look forward to continuing to do. That's what has made Minnesota a great state. And for many years, we've had outstanding legislators from both parties that used to really work well together. That has totally broken down, and we've got to get back to it. Now, in terms of immigration, let's just think of this in terms of justice. The fact is, as a de facto policy for the last 20 or 30 years, the United States has basically said, if you come in and put roofs on our houses and don't get in trouble, you can stay. That is the reality. And it is unjust to try to change that policy. If people are here, they've made the commitment, they've raised their families here, at a minimum, we have to have policies to make sure those families stay together and stay here.
Hello, my name is Deanne Young, and I work at the Mayo Clinic in Albert Lee, and I'm here as a proud member of SEIU Healthcare Minnesota. I've worked at the Albert Lee Mayo Hospital for 18 years doing sterile processing, and I am proud of the work that myself and my co-workers do to make our hospital run for families and for our community. I was one of the people on the one-day strike that we held on December 20th to show we were serious and wanting to have real negotiations that resulted in a fair deal that benefits workers and patients in our community. It was scary and cold to be on the picket line, but we were amazed by the outpouring of support we received from the community. Then we went back to work on December 21st. We were met at the door by Mayo security and told we were locked out for a week, Christmas week. 10 years ago, I would have called you crazy if you'd have told me I would vote for a strike. And I'd really think you were off your rocker if you said Mayo would lock us out and treat people in the community this way. It is just sad. We aren't the only ones who have faced Mayo executives putting profits over people. They've closed part of the Albert Lee Hospital and sent people over 20 miles away because they say it isn't making them enough profits. They outsource dedicated food service workers right here in Rochester, while we are fighting for basic dignity, fair pay, and healthy families for our community. It is scary standing up to an organization as powerful as Mayo Clinic. We are still without a contract, despite having to slow down the plan because they aren't ready. They still are proposing to shutter services at the Albert Lee Hospital. It is sad and frustrating to see Mayo acting this way. My question for all of you is what specifically would you do as governor to make sure that the wealth and power Mayo has built up is used for the common good, making sure rural communities have health care and workers in the hospitals are treated with fairness and dignity? Additionally, with Mayo announcing they will have a new CEO next year, what would you say to this new person about how Mayo and other powerful corporations should treat workers in our community?
Once again, I'm Lance Johnson, and Mr. Carney to my right alluded to the fact he's a Republican. If you don't all know this, there are two of us who are Republicans here. I'm the other one. Just like when I speak with the Republicans, there's a Jeff Johnson and I'm the other Johnson. So there are two of us, there are two Republicans, and other people in the Republican Party ask me, why do you go to these events? You know everybody there is going to be DFLer, and I say, that's fine. I think we probably agree on many of the issues, many of the goals. So let me tell you a little bit of a story about the Mayo Clinic. And I told this to Erin, and she didn't believe me. I told her this a few weeks ago. We were in Mankato. In 1958, and that gives you some further clear of how young I am, we were going back from Rochester to my hometown of Zumbrota. And the car went off the road, and I was taken to St. Mary's Hospital. And this is a true story. My right foot was off, except for the skin. I remember one person turned my foot, one person turned me, and they reattached it. I still have it today. I have an artificial ankle. So we need to recognize that the Mayo Clinic serves a very, very useful purpose. The woman who asked the question, I told her I read about Albert Lee, and I was very disappointed that the Mayo Clinic was not sitting down and making a more serious effort with the people in Albert Lee to work it out. You need to have jobs, you need to have education, you need to have medical opportunities in those cities. And I think the Mayo Clinic is, in my opinion, without full knowledge of the facts, bullying the Albert Lee people a little bit. So I'm very dismayed by that. And I think the Albert Lee group ought to stay intact. So I would support that. And yes, there always have to be reasonable relationships. And the CEO of the Mayo Clinic, I don't know him, but I would be optimistic that he would see that if someone who's governor is going to have some influence and say over what happens in terms of the medical opportunities and responsibilities in this state.
Since day one with my campaign, I did hold a listening tour around the state to understand our fellow Minnesotans' hopes and dreams, as well as their concerns and struggles. But the themes I came back with was that we're living in an age of the politics of unfettered greed. And it threatens to run over our quality of life and erode our quality of life in a very serious way. And that's what I think what 2018 is all about. So what I've been telling people is I'm there to end the politics of unfettered greed, which is really about big industry, big corporations. There's a place for them, but not at the expense of our quality of life, not at the expense of our fellow Minnesotans who are working hard every day and want to have dignity in their work, and that want basic health care, and want a roof over their head, and food on their table. So there's a couple of things I would suggest. Number one, I would be open to capping the CEO pay of nonprofit hospitals. Because they're nonprofit hospitals. They're nonprofit hospitals. And the Mayo is an extraordinary asset to our state, but there's some things that are really out of whack right now. I'm sorry to the translators, that's a strange word. But things are really out of whack. And we've got to get them back and make sure that we're focusing on the common good. That is government's job. That is government's job. And I'm trying to think of what else I want to tell you. But I'll make it very clear, you know, corporations and nonprofit corporations, they're supposed to be good citizens. That was what they were there for, and that they were there to do good. And so that's doing good upon our workers. And I did walk on the strike line, and it was cold. And the mistake that I made is I wore heels. But anyway, but it was exhilarating to be out there with people that, again, are asking for just basics. And that they want dignity in their work, dignity in pay. And I'm hoping that Mayo will continue to be a good citizen and get things worked out sooner rather than later.
Well, it's an incredible privilege that you've all given me to represent all of southern Minnesota. That includes the Mayo Clinic and the work that it's done, world-renowned healthcare, and the cities like Albert Lee, who I could not be more proud of to watch what civic engagement looks like with raising a voice of something to protect their community as they viewed that of raising up. The role of governors to find solutions, the role of governors to take on these hardest issues and step right into the middle of them. What happened here was, in going up and answering the questions they were asked, what I would say to the new CEO is communicate with people, be open and transparent. The issue was with Albert Lee is everyone was taken by surprise. They did not know what was coming on and they did not feel as if they were owned. It goes back to my original statement when I said those most impacted by the decisions we make must be at the table. So instead of talking about it, I went out and got David Mingy and facilitated a dialogue and got people to set back down. I'm not guaranteeing you those are answers, but those are the steps to getting there. This issue of rural health care is hellish right now. I tell you that because I have the responsibility of being the top Democrat on the VA committee. And what we see is we have a big bulk, 50% of rural veterans come from 15% of the country in these rural areas. And one of the things we were able to do is we know we've got to get more providers out there. We provided 1,500 graduate medical education slots to get out there, but to take those, we asked for 5 years back if you'd serve in rural areas. We've got to think about how we make sure whatever we do with healthcare makes it so that every single person has the basic human right of receiving healthcare, but making sure we have the providers and making sure it's affordable and accessible to them in those communities. So what I would say going back to this about the common good, we have this common good. We know that the employers need to have a healthy workforce. They don't want their people out sick. They don't want their people not being able to go. So we build these coalitions, bring them in, talk about how we best deal with this. We make sure it's done transparent. And I think all of us know the issue of healthcare being a for-profit industry is challenging to us, and we have to figure out how do we transition over that. But it is not going to start unless we're able to have the capacity, and as the governor of Minnesota, bring the players to the table, find those common values, and then start setting out where we go. But we need to get those doctors and incentivize them to get to the rural areas.
Well, one of the reasons I decided to run for governor is that we're in a really unique time in our nation's history. The concentration of wealth and power in fewer and fewer hands is just enormous, and it's impacting everything. And it's been really sad for me to see over the years how Mayo has behaved more and more like a Fortune 500 company and less like the nonprofit that it is. It isn't just Mayo, though. This is happening in the entire healthcare industry, and it's happening in a lot of other industries as well, where there's less and less focus on the people and more focus on the money. We have to really examine what the role of a nonprofit is supposed to be in Minnesota. And as governor, I would hold their feet to the fire to make sure that our laws are strong, that make sure that they are really there for the good of the people, because by being a nonprofit, they have exemption from taxes, and that's an enormous benefit that we all give them. And that's because they're supposed to be about the community. So over the years, I've been very open with Mayo Clinic about what I think about the various decisions that they've made, and I'm very frank with them, and they say thank you very much, and then they don't listen to me. But I think that they need to remember that the needs of the patient come first. There are a lot of wonderful people working at Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is not about the buildings. It's about the people who work there. And a lot of the employees are not feeling the love either. And we really have to get back to where they are, because if people decide to go elsewhere, I tell Mayo all the time, a reputation can be lost very quickly, and it's sad to me to see that that's happening. So I would tell the new CEO, remember, this is about the people in the state, the people in the community, the people who are your employees. It's not about the buildings. It's not about fancy hotels. It's not about fancy places to go at night. It's about serving the people in this community.
In the 17th century, doctors used to use leeches. In the 21st century, leeches use doctors. We gotta stop this. This is a serious problem. But let's talk about Mayo. Let's talk about what the strengths of it are and how we can build on those. The things that are unique about Mayo is, first of all, it's a clinic. You have everybody working on one team. You don't have the situation where you have all these individual GPs and then specialists, and you have to figure out scheduling an appointment to go to one person and the next person. It all works very fast at Mayo. And the reality is, Mayo pays people on salary. There's no economic incentive for a doctor to do anything or not do anything. And it's a clinic. It's a team, and it is actually a structure that can not only produce the best medicine in the world, which it does, but it can be a low-cost producer. So one of the things that Minnesota needs to do, and our political leadership needs to work with the Mayo Clinic to do this, is to figure out how we can get this model implemented around the country. Mayo's doing a lot of things right now to integrate their services more with other practices because medicine is practiced remotely so much. I think that's great. But we need to take the basic model that Mayo has been operating on and bring it out to the rest of the country, because all these specialties and all of this financial apparatus and infrastructure does not cure people. It doesn't provide health care. We've got to build on the Mayo model, which is really unique.
When I get to talk with the new CEO of Mayo, I will begin by saying your reputation in this community and in the state of Minnesota is important. So be generous. Be generous, as you always have been. Mayo has grown significantly, and they are known across the world, which is great. It's good for Minnesota. And they're doing tremendous things, but those tremendous things should not come at the expense of the people who live here or at the expense of the people who work at a Mayo facility. And I walked on the line with Deanne for 4 days, and it was cold. And I walked on the line with the food service workers, and I met with them. And I watched the heartache in those people as they expressed what they felt was a real break in something that they had been committed to for all of their careers. Some of the people in food service had worked at Mayo here for 40 years, and they were being turned away, no longer Mayo employees, outsourced. Heartbreaking for them and for that community. That impacts the way we feel about an important part of Minnesota, Mayo. So I would say to the new CEO, be generous, but also let's remember that we are operating at a time in this country and in the state of Minnesota where the concentration of wealth and power is held by too few people. I am a working person, and I was on that picket line for all of those days because I am a union person. And there are some tools that are ours in a powerful democracy that we must use together when we stand together and believe in our own capacity to take on powerful interests. And that is organizing, and that is collective bargaining, and that is voting rights, to make sure that the people who represent us inside the Capitol are going to stand up and fight for us. And I am that candidate. The power that is being held by too few people is only going to be wrested away when we believe in ourselves and our capacity to own that again. I'll do that as your governor.
Good evening. My name is Sister Marlis Jacks. I work at Assisi Heights as the program director for the Spirituality Center. And as Franciscans, we have had 800 years of vested interest in the environment, reducing our carbon footprint and supporting sustainability. We have a climate control committee in the congregation that really works diligently across membership, which is spread out all over the USA. In 2007, we started a renovation of the building at Assisi Heights, and at that time we considered wind. And in the process we did a study and realized that on top of the hill, we do not have consistent wind. So we had to let go of that idea. Then we looked at geothermal and found out that was neither feasible either because of the land structure underneath it. But I have to say that since 2014, we have had the benefit of 600 solar panels, 2 permeable paver parking lots, don't say those words in a row, and 3 prairies. We have an apiary, and that assists our gardeners and the gardeners in the neighborhood as well. We have tried to remove all of our buckthorn, and we have a tree planting program. We have a no pesticide policy on the grounds, and of all things, we have no usage of plastic bottles, water bottles. Woo! I know that sometimes it's necessary to have them, so anyway. we're into recycling and composting. But climate change is one of the greatest environmental threats that we face in our country. In today's political climate, it falls to the states and the cities to drive solutions that might mitigate the efforts of climate change to protect our communities. So my questions are, as a governor, would you commit to a future of 100% clean energy? And how would you work toward that goal in your first term? And then thirdly, how would you work with cities like Rochester to achieve this objective?
Sister Marlis Jackson, I am standing up for this one. So, my husband and I understood climate change decades ago, and we actually, with our own hands, designed and built a renewable energy home because we wanted to leave the planet in a better place, so I share your passion. And we have solar panels, geothermal heating and cooling, we have a wind generator, we have wind, and passive solar and earth berms, and it's a long list. My husband and I are lucky enough, privileged enough to drive electric vehicles as well. His is 100% electric, mine's not because I couldn't afford it, but I totaled my car and I had to replace. So I have a plan called the Minnesota Powered Plan. And it has all the numbers behind it. It's on my website, RebeccaOtto.com. And if you know the Citizens Climate Lobby, their fee and dividend plan, it's very much like that. But it has a twist. And that we're going to place a price on carbon. All that revenue is going to go to Minnesotans. It's not a tax, in the form of quarterly dividend checks. If you're a low energy user, which people in poverty typically are, they're going to come out ahead. But if prices go up on our fossil fuels, they're going to be held harmless and then some. But I'm going to have renewable clean energy tax credits that are also refundable. We're going to empower Minnesotans to change what they're doing. Landlords to retrofit buildings with solar panels so we can reduce rent on the renters. Imagine utility costs going down and how that helps a family keep a roof over their head. And we're going to burn much less carbon. My plan is so cool because the free market will respond. I want us to be on the cutting edge of the clean energy economy. These are 21st century jobs that last. And it will improve our health outcomes. It's morally the right thing to do, and there's an imperative that we do the right thing for our children. So I have a plan, Minnesota Power Plan. We're going to have Minnesota workers and Minnesota companies, and we're going to create 250,000 good-paying jobs in the process. So, and the great thing is environmental justice. When we burn less carbon, people in neighborhoods where there tends to be higher pollution, we're going to help them. Better lung health. But, more days in school for the kids, more days at work for the parents. So I've got a plan, check it out.
Well, this issue of climate change, I'm a geographer. I've also spent time in Tibet and have watched the glaciers there melt, and from the changes we've seen here and the increase of weather patterns that are not normal. We all know this is an existential threat. There's a stewardship of the land issue here, and there is an economic issue on this. I went to Congress running on this. I voted in 2009 for cap and trade legislation. It was the #1 targeted issue with all of the businesses that came after us and hit us on that. And that was one of those issues that was that is absolutely core to who we are. Now, moving forward from that, if we can't implement things and we can't move forward and we can't get coalitions to get them done, it will not happen. And what people really want to know is, people care about this, but people are out working hard. They want to make sure when they come home, they turn on their lights, the lights come on. They want to make sure they stay on, and they want to make sure their bill is payable. So what we have to do is go out and build coalitions of turning this on its head. Yes, we should self-actualize that it's an existential threat, but this is where we can make money. In southern Minnesota, we made that case, and we've seen some of the strongest growth in renewables of any place in the country. One of the leading congressional districts in wind generation. One of the ways we did that in Congress is by me building a coalition around the production tax credit, getting more people in it. IBEW and their workers training themselves up to make for the most qualified workforce and the fastest growing jobs to be able to be there. That made it easy to sell it to its neighbors. There's jobs here, it's dependable, it's out there. We need to make sure that we're continuing to make that case to people that this is in their best interest to go there. When we wrote the Farm Bill, there was so much opportunity there to move towards the environment and renewables that we passed the most environmentally friendly Farm Bill that we've ever had. And we did that by putting $100 million into Renewable Energy for America program, but we did it by bringing in the stakeholders of the farmers and the other producers to be part of this. So as governor of Minnesota, my commitment is to getting there because our children in the future is depending on it. We can do it in an environmentally and economically sound manner, and we can build this where we're not dividing, we're pulling more people into it. We've got a great start on this, but it's going to take that leadership to continue to push it over, and the people are ready for it.
It's pretty obvious what's going on with the climate. When we have all these hurricanes, when we have droughts, it's getting really hard for people to deny it anymore. So I think that the reality of what's changing around people is going to drive this, not anything we say to them about it. It's obviously an emergency. I think that, yeah, absolutely, we have to go toward 100% clean energy. We can hardly do otherwise. The question is really how fast. The first thing we have to do is stop authorizing and investing in old technologies that allow us to keep going with the old stuff. We shouldn't be authorizing any new pipelines. That's moving us the complete wrong direction. This is an emergency. We need to act as though it's an emergency. And the more we just enable the old technologies, the longer it's going to take to make the change we have to take. So the first thing we have to do is stand up to those forces in whose economic interest it is to continue with the oil and with the other kinds of polluting technologies. That's the first thing. And if we don't realize there's a side to be on, then shame on us, because there is. You know, there are people who are making money continuing the old way, and we have to stand up to them. The other thing is we really do subsidize a lot of stuff in this state. We give a lot of tax breaks, a lot of subsidies. I'm not saying we should never do that, but we should condition those kinds of things. Where public money is involved, we should condition that on meeting the public's goals. And clean energy goals are part of that. We've got to spend a lot more energy retrofitting buildings, using efficiencies, you know, not just generating energy in more clean ways, but also getting more efficient. And we need to help communities. You know, there's probably a lot of different ways we could do it, but working with communities across the state to help them be more efficient and help them with the know-how they need, and maybe with some resources to help them become more efficient and move toward the cleanest energy sources that they possibly can.
There's a tremendous opportunity here. I've got a core in physics from McAllister and an MBA from the U, and I've been studying this issue for a long time. In particular, how many people remember the World Book Encyclopedia way back in the day? In the 1950s, I was reading the article on solar power in the World Book Encyclopedia, and it said that there are 30,000 times as much energy coming to the Earth from the sun as all the mechanical energy produced in the world. Now, maybe it's gone down, maybe it's 10,000. But the fact is, first of all, there is no energy shortage. There is 1,000 watts of energy in 1 square meter of sunlight on a sunny day. What we need to do is harness it, and there's tremendous good news on that. The private sector is doing incredible things on energy. The reality is that alternative energy, both solar and wind, are becoming economically competitive. Battery technology is advancing to the point where we are going to see electric vehicles. It's pretty much at the break-even point right now in the next year or two. This is happening. And the private sector, you know, creative destruction, it is disruptive, but it is very powerful, and it is producing worldwide economic growth, because the reality is that energy is money. And we are having a huge infusion of energy into the world economy. So that is good news. And I think that the solution is going to come from technology and from the private sector. We need to manage it, we need to ride it, and we need to fight the special interests that are trying to stop it. That is crucial. Money and special interests are the huge problem. Our problem, you know, we've got division in this society. We've got to work to end that, and we've got to work to end the control of our political system by money.
So the Koch brothers are involved in politics, not because they like politics like I do. The Koch brothers are involved in politics because they are trying to protect their financial interests in fossil fuels. And that's what we're up against, right? That's what we're up against. I'm a nurse. The health of the people, the health of Minnesotans is critical to me. And I know that if we do not tackle effectively climate change, the way that we live, where we live, how we grow food, our very way of life, and the health of us is going to be impacted. So for me, as a nurse, as a citizen, as your next governor, this is a critical issue. When I was first elected in 2007, Governor Pawlenty, you know that guy who's thinking he's going to run, he believed in climate change and then he changed his mind, and we know why, because he wanted to be president. He'd like to be president again, and I think that's why he's coming back to Minnesota, so we got to stop him at that. We passed the renewable energy standard when I was first elected, and the market has responded, and so have Minnesotans, sister, just like you're describing in your church. You have taken tremendous steps to contribute to our solutions together in climate change. Minnesotans across the state have been doing that, and we need to match that as state policymakers and as your governor. So let's extend that renewable energy standard. Let us invest in the electric vehicle economy and the infrastructure to make that workable for people and tackle what's happening to climate as a result of the way we drive cars all over the state of Minnesota. Let's make sure the fleet, the state's fleet, is electric, so that we are taking on not just wind and solar, which we need to do, but also transportation, where we are burning a lot of fossil fuels. And let's recognize that one of the biggest contributors to our economy, the ag economy, and unsustainable practices are also contributing to this issue, and recognize that we can have sustainable ag practices. We can grow the food that we need, support local farmers, keep our water clean, protect our land. We can do those together if we put our hands back on our politics again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I'm a realist, and I believe it's nice to have the goal that we will seek to have a future of 100% clean energy. It's kind of like living in a world without sin. That's not going to happen. We need to be realistic about that. I think it's a good goal to have, and I applaud that. Believe me, I do. We have had times in this country, I don't know if some of you know this, but in about 1500, there were Indian tribes that lived in Wisconsin, and there were a couple hundred years they had droughts there. They couldn't survive. They left. There weren't any fossil fuels back in those days, so whatever the cause is, we do have a need to wean ourselves from some of these sources of energy. I don't really care so much what the cause is. If you have a truck or a large bulldozer sitting in that aisle and I can't get out of here, I have to figure out a way around it. Now today, for example, we have internet. And you know what's happening to the post office? It's not succeeding. We know what's happening even to the UPS and FedEx. It's not succeeding as much as it used to. So we need to find a way around it. Uber and Lyft are an alternative to other forms of systems. And we need to find another way to do this. And that's what I think is positive. And you can go into a store, whether it's a restaurant or some other store, and they can offer you a drink in a styrofoam cup. And you have a choice, and this is what I believe in. I have a choice. I won't buy there in that store if they're to give something to me in a styrofoam cup, which will be buried in a landfill and will probably never ever degrade. The same is true for some of these plastic bags. So I remember about 7 or 8 Spanish words from when I had to take Spanish in college. And it's poco y poco se va lejos. And I believe little by little we can go a long ways if we as individuals undertake to exercise some responsibility to have some of these features that allow us to move in that direction, because ultimately the other people will stop relying upon us to be their consumers.
Well, this concludes the formal portion of our questions. The final question comes from the online questions which were submitted. There were over 100, and I'm just going to randomly draw from the questions. Congressman, we were going in basic order, so you'll respond first. Let me look at you and grab the question. We even balled them up to make sure we couldn't read them before we looked at them. So the question is, what have you done in recent years to connect with minority communities in Minnesota, including Muslim communities?
We have a vibrant Muslim community in southern Minnesota. We have vibrant immigrant communities throughout Minnesota. And one of the things we've done, we've held many town halls, we've held roundtables where we've educated people on this. And I myself have gone out. Last Friday there was prayers up in the cities with Imam Assad. And spent time afterwards with folks to talk about. But more importantly, engaging in the workplace. We're blessed in Mankato that my friend Abdi is on the school board there, and his children go to school with my children. And the opportunities to see our communities strengthen, to see our communities working together and seeing the beauties that are in that. And I think one of the most important things, and we made a very clear case, these campaigns are ridiculously long and stupidly expensive job interviews. That's what they end up being. But you get to see how people act. You get to see how they're out there listening to you. You get to see about the issues that matter. And on our campaign, we did something that hadn't been done before. We created a team early. And my running mate, Peggy Flanagan, a Ojibwe woman from the White Earth Nation, has spent time on this issue. She's an expert in it. She's been there and bringing about those people to the table that should be there, about an understanding that engaging with the communities in a way where their voices are going to be at the table, not about just going for a short time, asking for votes and leaving, but asking what does it mean to be in the community? What does it mean to be our schools? What does it mean to get culturally appropriate people? What does it mean when we're seeing our communities up and around Leech Lake, where the communities outside of that get state money to basically take a bounty to pull kids out of those communities? How do we talk to them about strengthening inside there? How do we talk about working as partners? Because I can say again, our immigrant communities, our Muslim community, our indigenous communities are going to be a factor. If their children are doing well, everyone's doing well. And so as member of Congress, we've been there, we've worked on these issues together. As a candidate for governor, we've proven that this is going to be a central theme on how we get there, because once again, the opportunity gap amongst children of color does not just impact the children of color, it impacts the entire state, and that's where we see building a stronger One Minnesota.
So, I want to echo that. I think that the opportunity gap is one of the biggest challenges facing us in this state. And it's something that we have to get our arms around. And I've been saying in Rochester for many years, this is about all of us. It's not only about those kids of color. It's not about the communities of color. It's about all of us, because we need each other to move forward. And that's ever more obvious now that we have workforce shortages, that the technology, that people need the kind of preparation they never had before, and we can't afford to leave anyone behind. But the question is about, what I've done to interact with communities. I'm very, very fortunate, I think, that the district I represent here in Rochester is pretty diverse. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to know and work with and work on legislation with a lot of different people in the community. Unfortunately, recently I've had the opportunity to have to counter some pretty nasty language about Muslims, and sometimes about immigrants, other groups, Latinos. I'm constantly kind of answering back to people who come with these negative, ugly messages, and I know all of you are doing that as well. But I've really felt blessed to represent a community not only where we have some diversity, but also where a lot of people really appreciate that diversity. Of course, not everybody, but a lot of people do. But the one-word answer, though, I'd like to give you to the real question, what have you done? I would have to say, honestly, not enough. Not enough. I'd really like to do more. I think we all need to do a whole lot more, because what we've been doing obviously hasn't been enough, and we are not going to succeed as a state unless everybody is really a part of our economy and really feels ownership and really considers themselves and is considered a Minnesotan.
I'd like to talk about a couple of things. In the early 2000s, I was working for about 9 months as an interim finance director at an organization called the City Inc. And this was both a social services organization and 2 alternative schools in Minneapolis. There was one on Lake Street in Bloomington, and one on the near north side of Plymouth. And doing that, I had an opportunity to find out how social services and education are integrated to work with some very challenged students. There were students there that were homeless. And the organization itself was in a financial crisis. We implemented a 25% across the board cut in all non-personnel expenses. And that got the budget back in balance. So that was a very educational experience to me as to how that part of the public school system works. Another more recent experience that I've had is that I've been using exclusively public transit in the Twin Cities for the last several years. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and of course there are a lot of minorities on transit vehicles. And so that has been an issue that I'm focusing on. I'm trying to figure out how we can have better bus-based transit and how we can plan for a system that is going to have automated driving, because again, we are in the 21st century. This is the century of automating everything, and we need to plan for it. The opportunity to provide excellent transit for low-income and high-minority communities by automated driving is absolutely incredible, and we've got to concentrate on that.
So I'm in my 6th term, my 12th year as a state legislator, and when I ran the very first time, a woman in St. Paul said to me when I knocked on her door, and I loved to door knock, she said, remember if you get elected that not everybody grew up here in St. Paul. She said, I didn't grow up in St. Paul, I grew up in a little town in greater Minnesota. I grew up in a little town too in greater Wisconsin, Columbus, Wisconsin. I took her good advice to heart and have spent the last decade and a little more with the people of Minnesota all over the state of Minnesota. And Minnesotans have been very good teachers. I was recently at Bethune Elementary in North Minneapolis, and I spent part of my time in the classroom of kindergarten kids. All those kids were African American kids doing their very best. I was recently, well not recently, during Ramadan at an iftar at Shir Tikva, which is a synagogue in Minneapolis, and they held Ramadan iftar there together. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I was last week at the Hmong Chamber of Commerce, spending time getting to know people in that community about their interests in business and starting their small businesses. That woman who behind that door gave me that good advice was some of the best advice I ever got as a candidate. And it has served me very well as an elected official, because I have spent my time with people and learning about who we are and how we live through that lived experience. We are proud as Minnesotans, but there's a statistic we shouldn't be proud of, and that is the fact that we are the second most unequal state in the nation. We have disparities in learning with an opportunity gap, in health outcomes, in earning power, especially for women of color and Native women, and incarceration rates. And we should be doing everything we can to rectify that, because we want to make sure everyone in the state of Minnesota has a real opportunity at that bright future. The Minnesota House of Representatives, our House DFL caucus, as a result of the recruiting that I have done, is the most diverse we have ever been. We have 28 women and 29 men, 4 Native women, 5 people of color. That lived experience has been transformative, and when I'm the governor, my cabinet, the administration is going to be that lived experience as well, because when we bring the voices of people to the table, we make the right decisions for our future. Thank you for being here tonight.
I was chuckling when you're holding that sign up there starting to wave it, and I see that. It says stop. And you know, when I was a kid, we used to, you know what stop signs meant? Squeal tires on pavement. So this may surprise you because I'm reasonably tall and lanky individual, but I was a puny little runt when I grew up in Zumbrota, Minnesota. I was picked on. I was bullied. I was literally beat up. They came to my house one time and said, would I pay them money so they wouldn't beat me up anymore? So I gave them a pen and pencil set which my grandfather had given to me. So I tell you that because I am unalterably opposed to any kind of discrimination. I don't care who you are or where you come from. And even though I grew up in this small town where I was bullied, which was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, one of my best friends was the sheriff of Cook County in Minnesota. You can look him up. John Light, L-Y-G-H-T. A black man, he was elected sheriff for 23 years. I loved him, he loved me. When he got remarried after his first wife died, he asked me to be the best man at his wedding. I agreed. I have another friend who is gay. I have known him for 55 years. We're still friends. I have many women who are friends. I don't believe in any kind of discrimination. So, where I'm going with that is, I think that as governor, I would lead by example. I want to be kind of the good Samaritan. I don't want to be the person that passed by somebody and said, well, you're the wrong color, you're the wrong background, you're the wrong blah, blah, blah. It doesn't make any difference to me. Everyone should have equal opportunity, and I don't care where you go in the state of Minnesota, you should be safe, you should not be assaulted. And I don't care who you are on that issue is either. And I support that 100%. I'm not so much into this individual groups, because that starts to suggest that only they deserve protection. We all deserve dignity, and we all deserve protection.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. I'm Rebecca Otto. I have had the honor and pleasure of serving the entire state of Minnesota. I've had to run one statewide 3 times, and I've worked in communities around our state overseeing $20 billion a year. But I made a commitment 4 years ago, besides just doing my job, to really be more immersed in some of the different communities that I hadn't had a chance to really experience. And I have a very good friend, Muhammad Amin Kaheen, in Minneapolis, who brought me into the East African community, and the question was, what have we, how have we engaged? And I've engaged in so many different ways. I've gone to rallies against Islamophobia. I've been in many different mosques. I was asked by a woman, because they got to know me and I have a special name in their community, they consider me family, in the metro area. And I've gone to other communities in our state to connect with them as well. They will give you the shirt off their back, the food on their table. They're the most generous people, and they want to live the American dream. I had a woman whose husband was killed over in Somalia. He was an engineer, and he went to try to rebuild some streets in Mogadishu, and he was killed. She asked me to come to the memorial service. I came and I held her hand. So I've spent time in that community to make sure I really understand and I can be the best governor possible. But not all, there are other Muslims in the state of Minnesota who've come from other countries around the world. They're not all East Africans, so they're from all over. And I have many, many friends who happen to be Muslim, who are good friends. I get invited usually to the Ramadan soccer tournament in Minneapolis, and I give out the trophy to the winning team. I've been invited to many, many iftars, and they're so important because it's where we break bread. And it's a really special time. And so I feel that my life is much, much richer because of my experiences with all of our fellow Muslim Americans in Minnesota, and Somali Americans, but Muslims. So anytime that anyone ever says anything that's not nice about a woman with a hijab or anything else, I defend, because we're all Minnesotans. And we all must care about each other, and we do have something called freedom of religion, and our current president's a mess. But I want to thank you again. Thank you again so much for your time tonight, and have a great evening.
Honor to close us tonight. Sorry, the preacher in me is going to come out. Tonight we keep together across all that divides us to be united as a single body. I truly believe this. And so as we go out tonight into the families and neighborhoods that we call home, let us take this united front, this unity, and this ability to have a conversation into those communities. Because this conversation can't end here. It must continue to go forward. So as you go out tonight, if you have a chance to chat more with one of the candidates, we would love that. we would also love for you to stop at those organizational tables as you're getting your coat. Please make sure to register to vote if you are not already registered at the Cure table. Take a bus on Saturday up to the Capitol with the SEIU table for a rally, or hear more about a sanctuary meeting at the library this Sunday at the Isaiah table, or sign petitions at the Sierra Club, or get to know more of the people in all of these organizations. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being here and being a part of sharing.